to our program, The Color of Water. On behalf of the Reimagining America Project and the Catawba Riverkeeper, I'd like to welcome our audiences in person and on RAP's Facebook live stream, thanks to Aaron Mills. I'm Shirley Spanauer. I'm the co-chair of RAP's Environmental Justice Program. Our other co-chair, Jim Beard, is here with us tonight in person with his wife. And it's my honor and pleasure to introduce the program's moderator and panelists tonight. I'd like to acknowledge the Catawba and Cherokee Nations, who were the first inhabitants of the present Gaston region. Jackie Bagley is the Director of Construction and Facilities at Catawba Nation and is a board member of Catawba Riverkeeper. She was born and raised in Rock Hill at the old reservation, and her parents still live in the same land, in the same house for over 50 years. She attended Winthrop University and worked for the tribe in the late 90s. She then moved to Charleston and lived there for over 20 years. 2 years ago, she moved back home. She says she enjoys being back with her tribal family and, quote, "It's nice to be back on the Catawba River. Feels like home for sure." Vicki Taylor is Executive Coordinator for the Catawba-Wateree Initiative, working to produce a source water protection plan for the Catawba-Wateree watershed. She has also served as the Executive Coordinator for the Catawba-Wateree Relicensing Coalition since 2000, an organization that won a national award for inspired collaboration. She chairs the advisor committee of the Catawba-Wateree Water Management Group and leads their source water protection task force. Vicki serves on the board of directors of the Low Impact Hydropower Institute and the board of the Friends of Lake Norman State Park. She loves being outdoors and being near, in, or on water. Vicki holds a degree in anthropology from the University of Wisconsin and a law degree from the University of Colorado. And she's a member and active at this time of the California Bar. She has owned and operated a small international consulting business since 1990 and has lived in Australia, Germany, and England. A founding partner of RIP Ideas LLP, Vicki designs and facilitates programs that help people use their creative capacity to foster innovation, identify opportunities, and discover new approaches to chronic problems and new challenges. In all her work, she says she strives to achieve inclusion, equity, and creative collaboration. Our moderator this evening is John Searby, Catawba Riverkeeper Executive Director. He is responsible for the overall leadership of Catawba Riverkeeper and serves as its primary fundraiser, visionary, and relationship developer. John brings a diverse background in coaching, athletic administration, fundraising, design, marketing, sponsorship planning, and sales management to the Catawba Riverkeeper, using these experiences to build an organization that uses engagement with the water to fund protection of the water. John grew up in central Illinois, where his passion for the outdoors began while bird hunting with his grandpa. John attended Milligan College in Johnson City, Tennessee, where he was a 3-year starter and captain of the basketball team. He fell in love with the mountains of East Tennessee while earning a bachelor's in history and English from Milligan College and a master's in English from Tennessee Tech University. After college, John embarked on a 10-year career in basketball as a college coach and athletic administrator. He later worked in the business world for XOS Digital, Downstream Design, and Adams Outdoor Advertising. John currently resides in the South Fork River in Belmont, North Carolina, with his wife Jessie and his 2 kids. During his free time, he enjoys all things outdoors: kayaking, hiking, mountain biking, trail running, camping, bird hunting, and fishing, as well as consuming as much American history as possible. John also serves as the Charlotte Region and Catawba-Wateree River Basin as the Executive Director of Daniel Stone Botanical Garden, as a member of the Board of Directors of the Carolina Raptor Center, the Vice President of the Catawba-Wateree Licensing Coalition, a member of the Gaston County Travel and Tourism Board of Advisors, a member of the Farr Family YMC Board of Advisors, and as chairman of the South Fork River Health Committee. Shirley Greene could not be with us tonight, but she has a compelling story to tell us that's actually been on video. So I'm going to turn things over to John and let him set the scene for that. And please give John and our panelists a warm welcome.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you for everybody for being here. If you have not been to the River Room before, welcome. Not only is this a nice place to have a drink and have a meeting, the offices of Catawba Riverkeeper and our lab is behind our wall here. So if you're interested in taking a peek at that afterwards, we're happy to give you a tour. I think this video clip that we're going to show of Shirley really speaks to why we're here tonight and why a lot of people get involved in river and water issues in the first place, because it hits them personally in a way that they feel compelled to act. So I'm going to show this short video. This is we just celebrated our 25th anniversary as an organization, and for that project we interviewed a lot of our former board members and folks that have been involved with the organization. Shirley was a board member for 6 years, was on the board, who hired me in 2019, and is a very good friend and ally of this group. So we'll share a little bit of her story here.
Well, I got involved in kind of an unusual way. As I passed the bridge one day, I noticed that signs were up, no fishing. And that was really the only place that local people in Fairfield County had to fish was on bridges. And an accident had occurred where a trailer dislodged and hit a fisherman. And it seemed as if the community blamed the fisherman rather than the fact that a trailer dislodged. And I thought that that was quite unfair, that the fishermen wouldn't have places to fish. And I became an advocate that day.
It's really important to have
So, to give a little context of what we'd like to talk about tonight and kind of what we'd like to base our conversation on, I think it's important to have a little context of this river basin to start. If you live anywhere near here, you likely live in the Catawba River Basin, and you may not be familiar with how vast it is. On the wall to your right, there is a map of the river basin. And one thing you will see is that it is a very diverse geographic region. So it starts in the mountains near Black Mountain, North Carolina, and has protected trout streams in the upper portions of the river basin. And then there are 11 lakes where the river has been dammed to create hydroelectric generating power. And those are most notable in the Charlotte region with Lake Norman, Mountain Island Lake, and Lake Wiley. But there's others throughout the river basin that sometimes go a little less heralded. But you may have heard of Lake James in the northern part of the basin, Lake Wateree in the southern part of the basin. And so we have protected trout streams in the northern part of the basin. We have swamps in the southern part of the basin. Below the Wateree, Lake Wateree, the river turns to the Wateree River and is basically feels like you're in the Everglades. There's alligators down there. There's all kinds of interesting species of fish that you would not see anywhere else in the river basin. So this river is very interesting. It doesn't all look like the lakes that you maybe have in your mind that are around Charlotte. I think that context is important. And so when we talk about environmental justice and how it relates to water, you may or may not know that the environmental justice movement started in the state of North Carolina, in Warren County, North Carolina, and it was really because there was an industrial site being placed in a community of color against the wishes of the residents, and it was impacting their groundwater and their well water. And so the environmental justice movement across the entire United States started with a water-based challenge because we were putting pollutants in the backyard of a group who didn't have a loud enough voice to fight for themselves. And so that is often what comes to the forefront of our minds when we think about water-based environmental justice. And it's important. We should fight those things. We should fight the siting of landfills next to underserved communities. We should battle for unpiping creeks and streams that flow through communities of color. We should fight against pipelines going through communities that can't stand up for themselves and don't have the political clout. But sometimes what goes unthought about and unaddressed is how important having access to water in the first place is for everyone. Because our experience at Catawba Riverkeeper has been, if you get people excited about the water and interested in being on the water and participating in water activities, their passion for the water changes. Their interest in protecting their water changes. And so when you limit access to our lakes and our river based on socioeconomic or where you grew up or where you were raised, then that has an impact in equity across the river basin. So that's really what we want to focus on tonight, is how access to water impacts equity. And we're going to start by asking Vicki to walk us through a little bit of history, brief modern history, I would say, maybe the last 70 years of access in the Catawba River Basin.
Thanks, John. So I'm just curious, how many of you have ever been swimming in one of the lakes or the river of the Catawba-Wateree system? Of course. How many of you fishing? Boating? And is there anyone here who doesn't really even know that we have a river flowing? There usually are a few, but not that's just several raise their hands. But it's in our, some communities, the river is such a primary part, River Thames in London, right? The Hudson, but we don't, ours is a little bit out of the way. So we're going to talk about a little bit of the history of who has had access to the river, who will have access to the river. So that sign is a fairly typical sign from the past, and that sign is still up, by the way. So, abolition of recreation requirements. So, John mentioned that we have 11 reservoirs, 11 hydropower dams. These are operated by Duke Energy. You all know that, right? Well, Duke built its first dam in 1904. Is that right, John? Yep. And back in 1904, mostly people were just thrilled to have a power company come and make power. It brought electricity to a large part of the South. And there were almost no rules and regulations. Basically, thank you for coming, build your dams, which they did. Over the years, a number of dams were built. But also what happened over the years, starting in the 20s and the 30s, is some recreation requirements started to be enacted. And they were pretty slim at first, that you should have some access to these reservoirs that you created. But over time, they got more and more developed. But also, the power companies didn't even have to have a license to operate their dams. So all of Duke's dams were built without the benefit of a license and without the benefit of some of these evolving laws. But what happened in 1958? Anyone know? Lake Norman was started. Lake Norman, 32,000 surface acres, over 500 shoreline miles. It's a huge lake. They call it the Inland Sea, the biggest water body in the world. So by 1958, power companies had to have licenses. So Duke got a license, but even then, there were minimal recreation access areas, there was minimum recreation access needed, because it goes back to those early laws. After the license was issued in 65, it got more specific, but it wasn't applied to existing licenses. In 1986, we got something called equal consideration, where the power companies had to manage their dams for the protection of, for not just producing energy, but protection, mitigation, damage to, enhancement of fish, wildlife, spawning grounds, habitat, and recreational opportunities. So that really started it going. Well, then what happened was Duke's license in 58 was for 50 years. That meant It was expiring in 2008. So Duke had to get a new license, and they started that work in the early 2000s. But not only had these laws been enacted, we also got the Clean Water Act and the Endangered Species Act. So before this new relicensing occurred, where Duke had to, abide by all these rules, we had 48 access areas, 3 canoe portages, 5 fishing areas, and 3 swimming areas. And that's along over 1,700 miles of shoreline of the lakes. Now, the other thing is a typical access area in those days looked like that. It was a concrete boat ramp with a parking space. Now, lest you fault Duke, they didn't have to do anything beyond that. They're a power company, and their primary purpose is to generate electricity, do that efficiently, and do what they had to do with regard to recreation areas. So, who had access then before 2008? Which is when the new license would come into shouldn't come into effect, was actually applied for. People who had boats and trailers, that's who got to have access to the lake. People who lived on the lakes in these kind of exclusive subdivisions. People who went to parks, and there were darn few of those parks that actually bordered the water. And people who trespassed. How many of you, when you raised your hands about having been fishing and swimming in the lakes and the rivers, confess that you were actually trespassing on Crescent Resources lands? And that was the best access, wasn't it? I mean, there were natural sand beaches, there were rope swings, all the local kids knew where to go, where the trails were that led to it. But trespassing isn't always the best way to go, is it? So, like in Shirley's story, those people on the bridge, it's a dangerous thing to be having time to recreate or fish when you're not, in the approved area. So this is some picnickers getting ticketed at a site where a couple of weeks before people had drowned, and they were trespassing. But if you read the articles from the Charlotte Observer in 2004, basically they said there's no place else to go. So the good news is getting better. So how did Duke and the stakeholders involved figure out how to improve the recreation access? Well, they did studies, and they did a very vast recreational use and needs study to try and figure out what it is that people wanted and needed. And guess what? They did not want more boat ramps, right? What they wanted was trails. What they wanted was swimming areas, picnic sites, restrooms, canoe kayak launches. And Duke really took it to heart, and they put together a really solid recreation management plan. So what's in the new license? And there's also an agreement called the Comprehensive Relicensing Agreement. I won't get into that, but it runs parallel to the license. So there are going to be 9 new swimming areas, in addition to those original 3. That's the different places they're going to be. There's 20 new areas in the recreation management plan. Now, some of them are just adding a fishing area or bag fishing, but some of them are huge, like the Great Falls. Total number of improvements, 89. So the Great Falls, any of you aware of what's going on at the Great Falls in South Carolina? Not too many? Yeah. So it's called the Great Falls, but there has been no water flowing in it for over 100 years because it was dammed. And part of the negotiations when Duke got its new license was to re-water the Great Falls, both for habitat, but also to make an absolutely awesome whitewater recreation site. And that's what part of it will look like, and it is. We already had the grand opening, and it's something that I think everyone needs to visit and be very, very proud of, because it was a huge difference. Molly Creek on Lake-Wateree. This is the ribbon cutting. I think Shirley's in that photo somewhere. Jeff's probably in that photo somewhere. This is a beautiful park. Yep. Yep. It's a beautiful park. It has a swimming beach. It has two or three fishing piers, at least 2. Nice restrooms, parking spaces, grassy areas. It's a really lovely, lovely park for the region. I'm just going to highlight a few of these. And bridge fishing. So on the left there, that's That's a typical bridge where somebody would have had to hang on with their rod, trying to fish. No trespassing, no fishing, no parking, right? But that's what there was. Now, that middle picture, that got built as part of the negotiations and part of the new recreation management plan. I don't know how many there are, but there's several really lovely walkway bridges for people to be welcome to fish in the Catawba River. And that's just the dedication plaque.
That's actually the bridge that Shirley.
That's the one?
That's the one.
So, but is this enough? So that recreation use plan that I studied, recreation use and needs study that I mentioned, we now have 16 million visitors each year, and it's growing. There's over 1,700 miles along this entire project. Of that 1,700, 8.6 miles are public recreation, and that includes the circumferences of the islands. That's 0.4%. That's not a lot. How come? Because we started really late. Most of the shoreline is not up for grabs for recreation anymore. You know, all these years, only a handful of counties actually stepped up and said, you know what? We'd like our residents to have access to this river, have access to this lake, and develop some kind of parks or some kind of access beyond what there's minimum requirements were. But most did not. So, you know, there's no point in blaming. It just wasn't on people's radar to think about doing it in those days. So, in order to meet the need, partnerships are essential. We need to work with the land trusts who are actively conserving more land that can provide access, trails, camping, canoeing, kayaking. Work with your land trust. If you don't know who your local land trust is, find out. The Riverkeeper, obviously. Your towns and counties, whatever your local jurisdiction is, let them know that parks are important. Water access is critical to quality of life. I live in a county where a few years ago we were trying to urge the commissioners to build our land park, and one of the commissioners said, we don't need parks. Kids can play in their backyards. I won't mention it. Work with your non-government organizations such as this group here, your state and federal agencies, and certainly with Duke Energy. They are absolutely receptive to bragging about and making sure that the work that they've done to provide recreational access is used and is used safely. So with that, I'll say goodbye, and I'm sure we'll have a moderating discussion and answer any questions you might want.
Thank you for that. I want to throw the first question out to Jackie and ask Jackie, give us a little perspective for you personally and more broadly for citizens of the Catawba Nation, what the river means to you and kind of how it is a part of your culture. I know you have some things to share with us as well.
Sure. Thank you, John. Thank you all so much for letting me be a part of this. Again, my name is Jackie Bagley. I'm in the Catawba Nation. I work there as well as a citizen, being there. This is an example of some of the clay that we gather off the Catawba River banks. We have some certain sacred clay holes. Our people have been known to be around for over 6,000 years. This pottery is made today, just like they made it 6, 7, 8, 10,000 years ago. We have sacred clay holes that we go get this clay from. It's when I say secret, I mean it's a secret. You gotta really know somebody that knows somebody, right? But my people make this pottery exactly the same way as they made it thousands of years ago, which is pretty neat. There's a book here that I brought to the Catawba Indian Nation, the people of the river. I don't even know if you can get this book anymore or not, but I would encourage you to do it. It shows our history of how we came. This pretty lady right here is actually my mother on that book. So there's that. And then we have this piece is River King.
So a long time ago, there was tons of river cane all over the banks of the river, and they harvested that, and obviously made, we didn't have the radio back then, or Spotify, or any of those kind of any of that kind of stuff, so obviously we had our own music. This is one of the projects that we're working on now, currently, to try to bring this river cane back. It has, unfortunately, due to development, things of that nature, it's just like the sweetgrass in the Charleston area. It's hard for the locals or the natives to get the stuff that they used to use to make their stuff. So, to your question, John, I grew up on the free-flowing part of it, from the Fort Mill Dam on down past Wateree. So the lake system I'm not very familiar with, unless I had a rich friend that had a birthday that we all got to do something like that with. But other than that, I grew up in the free-flowing part. As a child, my father would take me fishing along that river. We would sneak, of course, trespassing, I believe it was. I think I was, my father was Caucasian, by the way, my mother was Native. I think by having me with him, he thought I was the token get out of jail card. Like, I got this Indian kid with me, we're not trespassing, that kind of thing. But anyway, I grew up on that part. And in my late 20s, mid-20s, whatever, I became a pretty avid canoeist. So I'd be on that water playing all the time, again, from that free-flowing part of it all. And back then, it was just little whack-through trails, little foot-through trails, that you get to down to the river. Occasionally, we would cross somebody that wasn't around there or from there, or, just a little fisherman or whatever. And we would put in up near where you all know where the pump house is now, where the river park and all that stuff. So that's where we would put in, right behind the old Celanese. When I was a kid, we called it Celanese, going through the so much and all that. But we would put in right there. And then we would end up taking out at the reservation, which is about 8 miles on the river, about 6 hours, depending on how many times you stop and stuff like that. One of the funny things is that back then, when me and my buddies would put in, if we ran across someone, they'd be like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? Obviously with a canoe or kayak, it's obvious, like, what do you think you're doing, right? You get in the river and playing, oh yeah, where are you taking out? Where are you going to take it out on the river? It's like, well, we're probably going to take out the reservation. The reservation? Are you crazy? Those people down there will kill you. All that kind of stuff. Where he's like, we're going to take our chances, and all that kind of stuff. Knowing good will is most of my people. So I'm like, no, they're not going to kill me. But anyway, when we would take out at the reservation, it would still be, again, a little footpath of some sort, right? So if you weren't paying attention, you're like, oh, I missed my little footpath, and then you'd have to turn around and come back up. Having access now, the way it is a big benefit to somebody like me who still goes out there, because now I don't have to truck through the mud and fight all the briars and stuff like that. But I also see a lot more people that love it like I do. So that's a good thing, right? We want people to love the water. We want them out there learning about it. A selfish note, I made it, because I thought that was all mine. And it was just me out there and a few friends, whatever. This was heaven. This was all mine. Well, now, the downside, kind of, to having access to whatever is now you got all these people, and then with people comes trash, those kinds of things, whatever. But we're super excited to have the accesses that we have. We know your county is planning on doing a few more, and it is a necessity, unfortunately, in order to get people to understand and love the river like we do. You got to get them to it. And we just will continue to pick up the trash. That kind of stuff. 2 Sundays ago, we did a river cleanup with Greg and some of the folks. We picked up over about 500 pounds of trash in just that little short window. We left so much more that we could have gotten. But when in my 20s, when I was doing it, if you saw a piece of trash, it was an oddity, right? You never saw trash. But now it's, unfortunately, we see so much of it. So that's the second reason I think it's very important to have these accesses so we can get out there and really clean it, monitor it, and look at, see what's going on, what we're doing to our waterways.
Vicki, I want to throw a question out to both of you, but ask you to answer it first, Vicki. What ways have you seen, since you've been on the lake and on the river, what ways have you seen racial or socioeconomic inequities directly related to the lakes, the river, access to it, in any way, shape, or form that you maybe stand out to you?
the main thing, not the only thing, the main thing that comes to mind is watching what happens when you open a public beach. Lake Norman State Park was the only beach on Lake Norman for a long, long time. And the old beach actually had runoff from some farm property from streams above it, so it was contaminated a lot. But it was the only place that people who didn't have the means or their own waterfront properties to go. And what typically we saw was a lot of people of color at that beach because other people didn't go there. So, or they did, but not in great numbers. It was a disproportionate number of people of color at that beach that one would see walking around the Caribbean general. So it became a magnet because it was the only place it just spoke volumes. They did abandon that beach finally, and they built a much nicer beach. But still, it's very much a lot of diversity on that beach, and it just speaks volumes that these public beaches are so absolutely needed because there is no other place for folks to go who don't have the means to own property or boats on the lake. And one by one, where I live up in the northern end of Norman, where people said nobody goes up there, and I said I do. I've seen all the old fishing holes, the rope swings, swimming holes, the ones that the local kids knew, black, white, Hispanic, and they're all gone. So, does that answer it?
Yeah, I want to add a context. This past weekend, Memorial Day weekend, because it was raining all weekend, very few people were out on Lake Wiley. So I had the opportunity to go out, and there's a new swim beach at the dam at Lake Wiley. It's in Rock Hill. And you almost can't get there by boat because it's blocked off, it's in a cove, it's a really protected area. But I went up as close as I could get. It was Monday afternoon, it was cold, it was not really a day that very many people were on the lake. But the beach was packed. The fishing piers were packed. And it was all Latino families and African American families. Every single person at the beach. And it just reinforced to me, it was timely with this conversation, reinforced to me that the reason that we don't see more people of color on our lakes is not because they don't want to be on the boats. I think that is a common misconception. And when you see access areas being utilized, and you realize that it's because they have not had access to our lakes. Because every square inch of our lakes is owned by private individuals or large developers, and they're pricing out middle and lower income families. That really struck me about the access. Jack, any specific things that you recall over your lifetime that really kind of stand out to you?
Thank you, John. Yeah, I mean, again, that free flowing part. This 2 Sundays ago when we were down, I was shocked at how many now landowners there are that have built houses right up on the water. Just on that free flowing part as well, we were kind of like taken back by that. My experience mostly is in the Charleston area where I've seen sweetgrass baskets not being made or access to it anymore because of Kiowa, because of all of the higher end home communities. They cleared out and put a gate up, and no one's allowed in there but them. So maybe that cultural aspect of it. It also inhibits us from our river cane as well. We have a private landowner who doesn't understand how important that this was once all free to all of us. But yeah, we see it on a lot of times. We're seeing it more too, which is kind of worrisome when we see these. Is it Sun City or one of these the larger developments where they come in? They're doing all that kind of stuff where we don't have access anymore to fish like we used to. A lot of tribal members still rely on fishing and feeding their families that way. They also rely on hunting up and down that river part for the deer to feed their families. They heavily rely on it. And wouldn't think so in 2023 that there are families out there who we all go to the grocery store, right? Not everybody does. They still rely on fishing in that river. So we need to have access to them, get there and feed their families.
So I want to ask one more question and throw it out to the group and see what questions you all have, either for any of us or for some of the other folks that are knowledgeable in the space in the room. What comes to mind for you two of ways that we as residents can get involved in advocating for access and advocating for better ways to engage diverse communities in getting on the water? Any ideas that pop in your head?
I mean, the first one is get to know your local officials and let them know that this is really important for you. I know that Jennifer Roberts is one of the founders of this project, and I can remember, I don't know how many years ago, but it was a long time ago that I stood in front of Jennifer when she was, I don't know, when she was mayor or commissioner or whatever she was, and I had a big card and I made my pitch about what's wrong with Vancouver County. Why don't we have any swimming areas? And the story they had then was they were free of liability if somebody drowned. Well, guess what? People are more likely to drown in an developed recreation area than a developed recreation area. But we finally did get them to turn around and bring some free parking and a couple others. But I think find out who your local officials are, planning departments, commissioners, and let them know how important it is to have equitable access to our rivers and lakes.
I couldn't say it better. I agree more. Come see us. Come down to the reservation and see us. You're more than welcome to come and say, hey, I want to see that Jackie girl or whatever. Oh yeah, I can give you the tour around it, but come see us. We support the River Foundation heavily. We think that it's it's our lifeline, right? If you didn't have water to turn on in your sink, what would you do? You'd have to go get water somewhere, right? So you want to make sure that water is nice and clean to be able to get to it. But come see us. We'd be happy to show you what little bit of access we have and how important it is to have more access for folks to be able to fish, particularly in our way. So we can feed our families. But we totally support the Riverkeeper Foundation, and I just encourage you to get out on the water and see.
One more thing I just thought of, I mentioned land trusts before. There's a number of land trusts in the region, Fisherman's Conservancy, there's Catawba Lands Conservancy, and they're out there every single day looking for land to protect, and a lot of that land these days they're looking to protect is along waterways because those are vanishing, where they're going to be able to put in passive recreation, new kayak plunges, possible primitive camping sites, fishing sites, but places where people can just go and enjoy nature along waterways. So get to know your local land trusts. You can volunteer to help them, and just great to know.
One of the things that has been kind of brought to the forefront for us at Catawba Riverkeeper that we're working really hard on is the recognition that a vast majority of the shoreline fishermen in the Catawba River Basin are Spanish speaking, and they are trespassing into areas to get access to the river because there are no access in their neighborhood. And then to exacerbate that situation, there's no signage to communicate with them about where you should be, where you shouldn't be, fish consumption advisories, those types of things. So one of the things that we're as an organization working really hard on is making sure that when we're doing communication plans, when it's specifically going to impact shoreline fishermen, that we're being cognizant of the fact with programs like our swim bag program or our monofilament fishing line recycling programs, that signage is both in English and in Spanish, and that we're providing access to instructions about where it is safe to eat fish. Because the reality is there's fish consumption advisories on this entire river basin for mercury and PCBs. And you probably should not be making fish your daily diet. And people who are doing it for two reasons. One, they don't know that, or two, their life situation is such that they have no other source of protein other than what they can catch. So, informing them and educating about being careful about that practice is really important, and it has to work alongside with trying to improve the water quality so that those issues are not prevalent anymore. I want to throw out to the audience any questions. We have a couple other people in the room that are really knowledgeable, that are part of the Riverkeeper staff. So Brandon Jones, who is the Catawba Riverkeeper, he has the pleasure of having the title Catawba Riverkeeper. And then Ryan Carter is our policy manager here at Catawba Riverkeeper and is heavily involved in a lot of the policy work that we're doing. So would love to pass around the mic if anybody has any questions or comments, whether it's for any of us or for Brandon or Ryan.
I did want to ask you about the fish, eating the fish, because the past Catawba Riverkeeper told me the same thing. But I go back and forth on Armstrong Ford Road in Gastonia every day. That's an unimproved bridge. I see people fishing off of it every day. There are no signs that I've seen, and there people are parking on either side where it says no parking. And I just see it every day. And yet, all along the way on that road, we're starting to build. So there's, I just wonder about the amount of water when we're doing all this increased building of apartments and everything. And I know we need housing, but it still seems to be a struggle. It would be a struggle.
Yeah, that spot that you were talking about right below the Armstrong Ford Dam on the South Fork is probably the most popular shoreline fishing spot in all of Gaston. And it is, it's almost entirely Spanish-speaking families. And on the Belmont side of that, there is a 12-acre park that is going to go in as a part of that development that's just gotten started. And there is a planned kayak launch there and a fishing pier as well. So I am hopeful that there will be some relief to that. If you've got a couple of bucks, the property on the other side of the river is also for sale right now, and we'd love to get our hands on it and put a park there as well. But yeah, that's a very popular spot.
Glad to hear that. I thought it was all to be apartments.
Yeah, that project on the Belmont side, we worked really hard with that developer. They agreed to a 300-foot buffer all along the river, and they're going to put a public trail all along the river within that 300-foot buffer. So access there is going to be better than safer. Ryan, would you mind touching on the conversation with the Mecklenburg County Commission about the impacts of Sugar Creek on downstream neighbors, particularly the Catawba Nation?
Hi everyone. So Brandon, if you could point on our lovely map where the Sugar Creek Basin is. Right, so pretty much if you're looking at Mecklenburg County, everything south of I-85, everything east of UNC Charlotte. So a really, really big chunk. The airport, the part of the airport, all of uptown, South Charlotte, Valentine, Matthews, pretty much it. So that's a big chunk of the area. And we've got a lot of people, we've got a lot of impervious surface. And so that generates, well, three things. Volume and velocity of water. So Sugar Creek, once it hits the state line, splits York and Lancaster County. And that has pretty much become a canyon. That creek will spike 30 feet. That's kind of the record right now, 28 feet. But on a regular day, last week in winter rain, Sugar Creek spiked 5 feet. So that drums up a lot of sediment, sends it all downstream. And then right when the Catawba River takes that hard hook down south, it goes right past the Catawba Nation. Along with all of that, there's a tremendous amount of trash that flows out of Mecklenburg County. York and Lancaster County, they've got some responsibility there as well. But I've paddled all of those creeks, and I can tell you for a fact is Mecklenburg's problem.
Right.
Thank you. This is a picture of where Sugar Creek comes in. I'll walk and talk. So here's our beautiful Catawba River. If you've driven south on 77 across the river, you look out and say, oh, look how pretty the river is. That's so lovely. And then here comes Sugar Creek. And that's it. You should be able to see there's Uptown Charlotte right there. One of the big things about environmental justice that we see is out of sight, out of mind, right? Something else you don't see anywhere around here is development. So we just don't talk about it. We just look the other way. In Mecklenburg County, I grew up there, I was raised there. I'll be the first to say, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about where does our runoff go. And that is a really big issue. So probably just about a year ago, we had a great meeting between the Mecklenburg County Commission as their Environmental Stewardship Committee. They actually had more commissioners volunteer to be a part of this conversation, so it actually triggered public disclosure law, so that's pretty cool. Between Mecklenburg County Commission and tribal leadership of the Catawba Nation, and from our records and Mecklenburg County's records, it's the first time that Mecklenburg County Commissioners have talked with tribal leadership of the Catawba Nation. Think about that. And we really were able to shine a light and are so grateful for the Catawba Nation to say this is the history of what's going on. Because while this isn't anyone's backyard, the nation's backyard is right here, literally right here, just out of front. So yeah, pick up your trash, please. That's my son's speech. So yes, if you have more questions, happy to talk with you afterwards.
I'd say real quickly about that. Prior to European contact, that all that used to be Catawba land. We initially were on that side of the river. Downtown Charlotte was probably one of our largest settlement sites, so to speak, all the way down through here. Sally U River, if you ever want to look her up, she was one of the first modern ladies, I guess I could say, in the tribe that owned property. She owned all of that. So my ancestors owned all of that. And unfortunately, flu came and all that stuff. We lost a lot of people. They moved to this side of the river, which is where we are now, trying to get away from disease. But all of that has a tremendous amount of historical value to us. But unfortunately, like Brian was saying, it's just, they don't want to develop it because they've polluted it so much.
Any other questions or comments or inquiries? Jeff?
Great version, great comment. I'm Jeff Robert. I work with Duke Energy and have been involved with the food licensing. If you don't know, on the Duke Energy website, if you just Google lakes and recreation, you can go in there and there's a map, interactive map for the whole Catawba-Wateree, and you can go lake by lake or river section by river section and see where the public access points are. You can also see what kinds of amenities are available there. You can also get the recreation flow schedule from the 5 locations where there's a free-flowing river stretch downstream along the range. You can get that there on the website. You can also get to that flow information and lake levels, of course, on the Duke Energy Lakeview mobile app on your cell phone. So I always try to plug that because lots of people still don't know about that, and it's really a great resource. And just 2 other things. We talked a lot about bank fishing. At these public recreation areas that Duke Energy owns, up until we did the relicensing process, at most of those, if you were bank fishing, you would get a ticket from the game warden fishing road. And that's because in the old days, those things were built for motorboats. Because that's really, in the late 50s, that was what was envisioned as, well, that'll probably be the main recreation activity always on these lakes. That's probably all most anybody would want to do. Well, it's very different from that. And it's really thanks to Shirley Greene, who was involved in the relicensing process, that pointed that out and said, you know, why does it have to be that way? There can be use for conflicts between bank fishermen and boaters, obviously. Where do those conflicts occur? Right at the boat ramps and in the parking lots. So we changed our design. Instead of having the vast majority of the parking spaces be for boats and trailer combinations, we are adding, as we upgrade these, we're adding single car parking spaces. And we have changed our policy and we've communicated it with all the game wardens that anybody and everybody can bank fish in the boundaries of the Duke Energy access areas unless and except for the places that are specifically signed for no bank fishing. And those are right at the boat. So all that shoreline is now available for bank fishing. A lot of people still don't know that, but there are lots of opportunities that are closer to some of these folks than just the developed fishing. So, again, great program, I appreciate it. If you have a recreation director in your county, or you have a county council person or city council person that it has a sympathetic ear for public recreation, please go talk to them, because some of these places that are really having transformational change here in public recreation are the ones that are coming to us to lease some of these access areas, and then we jointly develop them as public parks. And when we lease them to a local government, it's $1 a year. That's all we charge. What the county gets out of it is better facilities around the lakes, but the lessee then does the day-to-day management of those facilities. And if you want to see some real results of that, go to the Rock Hill Park that John was talking about. That was developed by Duke Energy on Duke Energy property. The city of Rock Hill has leased it with management. And in about a month, go to Allison Creek Park on Lake Wiley. It's the single biggest public recreation development our company's ever done. And it's 164 acres of all kinds of facilities. It's going to be a great memory maker. I see all these access areas as memory makers because that's what they do. A lot of the families that come there, that's their vacation. That's the memories these kids will grow up with. Just my thoughts.
Thanks, Jeff. Just one closing comment, and I'll turn it back over to Cheryl. I think the intersection of all these different pieces of environmental justice as it relates to water issues are really important. And I think we can't let any of them slide by and say, oh, well, we'll deal with that another day. And so, a lot of times we find ourselves fighting multi-front battles. We're fighting industrial polluters, we're fighting access issues, we're fighting residential development, commercial development, but it has to be done that way because they're all coming at it at the same time. And the river has threats coming at it from a lot of different ways. The thing I always remind people is this is your river, and the reason Catawba Riverkeeper is here is to help fight on your behalf and alongside you. And so the fight can only be made when we all join in the fight together. And it is because it's all of our rivers. It doesn't belong to Duke Energy. It doesn't belong to any one of us individually. It belongs to us collectively. And so I would encourage you to get involved collectively in whatever way is appropriate for you. One last little comment, and again, I'm sorry, I said that just a minute ago. Ryan has some flyers here. If you're not aware, Governor Cooper has made a statement that before the end of his term, he wants to create an executive order statement about the importance of achieving environmental justice in North Carolina. The last listening session is June 17th in Charlotte. And Ryan's got the information here. You can scan the QR code to find out more information to register. But there's no better way to get your voice heard than to show up at an event like this. Because the things that will come out of this executive statement will impact the way the state agencies are operating moving forward. So I would encourage you to participate in LGT.
Just want to thank John and Jackie and Vicki for their time, and feel free to talk to them afterwards and gather with us in the tap room. Thank you so much for coming out.